Imagine being told by your own mother that there isn't enough room for you at your only sister's wedding, only to look at the official guest list and see that your spot was given to your brother's new girlfriend of 2 weeks. That is exactly what happened to me, and as I sat in my car staring at that text message, a wave of betrayal washed over me that I didn't think I would ever recover from. But what my family completely forgot, or rather, what they never bothered to find out because they always looked down on my career, was that the historic, high-end estate they had booked for this massive dream wedding didn't belong to some faceless corporate hospitality group. It belonged to me. I bought it out of foreclosure 2 years ago, fully renovated it, and kept it under a holding company, and now they were about to find out exactly what happens when you treat the landlord like an outcast. Am I the bad guy for doing what I did next? Or would you have completely ruined their special day, just like they ruined my relationship with them? To understand how we got to this point, you have to understand the dynamic of my family, because I have always been the black sheep, the afterthought, and the person they only called when a bill needed to be paid. I am the oldest of 3 siblings. My younger brother, Julian, is the golden child who can absolutely do no wrong in my parents' eyes, despite the fact that he is 28, bounces from entry-level job to entry-level job, and still asks my dad for rent money every other month. Then there is my younger sister, Chloe, who has always been the princess of the family, coddled, spoiled, and raised to believe that the world owes her everything she desires. And then there's me. I was the quiet kid who excelled in school, worked 2 jobs through college to avoid student debt, and eventually started my own commercial real estate and property management firm. Because I didn't follow the traditional corporate path my father envisioned, and because I didn't constantly beg them for approval, my parents, Richard and Alina, treated my success as some sort of fluke. They never asked about my business, they never celebrated my milestones, and whenever we gathered for family dinners, the entire conversation revolved around Julian's latest mediocre achievement or Chloe's expensive lifestyle. When Chloe got engaged to her fiancé, Bradley, who comes from a very wealthy, old-money family, my mother went into an absolute frenzy. Alina was determined to throw a wedding that would impress Bradley's parents, wanting to project an image of extreme wealth and high society, even though my parents' actual financial situation was thoroughly middle class. They were stretching themselves incredibly thin to afford this event, taking out second mortgages and liquidating retirement accounts just to keep up appearances. Chloe wanted a fairytale spring wedding at the Grand Oaks Manor, a stunning, sprawling historical estate just outside the city that features a massive glass conservatory, manicured gardens, and a grand ballroom. What Chloe and my mother didn't know was that the Grand Oaks Manor had been drowning in debt under its previous ownership, and my holding company, Vanguard Estates, had purchased it, invested nearly $1 million in modernization, and turned it into the most exclusive, high-priced wedding venue in the state, with a waiting list that stretched out for nearly 2 years. Because I am rarely involved in the daily bookings, leaving that entirely to my highly capable general manager, Marcus, I had no idea my family had even applied to host the wedding there. Apparently, my mother had used a high-end wedding planner who managed to secure a cancellation slot for them, paying a premium that must have drained the very last of my parents' savings. When I first found out about the venue choice during a rare family dinner 6 months ago, I actually smiled and tried to bring it up, mentioning how beautiful the estate was. But my mother instantly cut me off, saying, "Please don't start bragging about your little apartment rentals, Danish. This is a world-class luxury estate, and we are trying to focus on Chloe's big day. So let's leave the business talk to people who understand high society." I just took a sip of my water and decided to keep my mouth shut, thinking it would be a hilarious, heartwarming surprise when I showed up at the rehearsal dinner and revealed that I was the one providing them with the venue. I even quietly called Marcus the next day and told him to apply a massive 40% discount to their final catering and liquor package, absorbing the cost out of my own pocket as a wedding gift to my sister, without taking credit for it yet. But as the months rolled on, the disrespect from my family only intensified. I was completely excluded from the wedding planning process, which was fine by me, But then I noticed I hadn't even received a formal invitation in the mail when the deadline approached. When I asked Chloe about it over text, she casually replied that she was super busy and must have forgotten to mail mine, but that I was obviously expected to be there, telling me the date and time and instructing me to wear a standard black suit. I brushed it off, chalking it up to wedding stress, and continued preparing my business for a very busy spring season. Then came the week of the wedding. The event was scheduled for a Saturday, and on the Tuesday prior, I received a lengthy, incredibly clinical text message from my mother. The message started by saying how expensive everything was and how the venue had strict capacity limits due to local fire codes. She wrote that due to an unexpected influx of Bradley's extended family and prominent business associates, they had hit their absolute maximum headcount. She then said, "Since you are family and you understand how important this night is for Chloe's social standing, we know you won't mind stepping aside so we don't offend Bradley's family. We love you, but we simply don't have a seat for you at the ceremony or the reception. But we will make sure to send you plenty of photos from the photographer." I sat at my desk, staring at my phone in absolute, stunned silence, feeling a physical ache in my chest as the sheer weight of their cruelty sank in. They were disinviting their own son, their eldest child, from his sister's wedding because I wasn't deemed important enough to occupy a seat that could otherwise go to someone who might elevate their social status. I called my mother immediately, but she let it go to voicemail. I called my father, who answered but sounded incredibly annoyed, telling me that a leaner was handling the guest list and that I needed to stop being selfish and making Chloe's wedding all about myself before hanging up on me. Angry, hurt, and pushed past my limit. I logged directly into my company's secure internal database and pulled up the digital client portal for the Grand Oaks Manor. I opened the folder for the Imran Bradley wedding and reviewed the finalized guest list and seating chart that my mother's planner had submitted just the day before. There, in black and white, sitting at table 3 right next to the head table, was my brother Julian, and right next to him was a seat-labeled guest of Julian Imran. I did a quick search on social media and discovered that Julian had started dating a girl exactly 12 days prior, a girl my parents had never even met, and yet she was given a prime seat at the wedding while I was cast out like garbage. That was the exact moment something inside me snapped, replacing all my sadness with a cold, calculated fury. So that is the incredibly messed up situation I found myself in, sitting in my office realizing that my own blood thought so little of me that they traded my presence for a stranger's, all while using a venue that I owned and paid for. Before I tell you exactly how I executed my revenge and what happened when they showed up at my property, I want you to pause right now and drop a comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have just stayed home and cut them off forever? Or would you have used the massive power you held over their entire day to teach them a lesson they would never forget? Let me know your thoughts down there, because things are about to get incredibly chaotic. Now, as the owner of the holding company, I technically had the legal authority to cancel their contract on the spot, but looking through the paperwork, I saw that a standard cancellation would require my venue to refund their deposit if it fell under certain emergency guidelines, or it would just result in a massive legal headache. More importantly, a cancellation on Tuesday would give them 4 days to scramble and find a secondary location, like a country club or a hotel ballroom, and I didn't want them to have an escape route. I wanted them to feel the exact, crushing weight of public humiliation that they tried to inflict on me. I noticed that the final, mandatory venue compliance and structural safety walkthrough, along with the remaining incidentals insurance waiver, had to be signed by the primary contractor, my mother, at the venue office no later than Friday morning at 10 o'clock, or the event insurance would be voided, and the venue doors would legally remain locked under municipal city codes. My mother had completely ignored the automated emails from Marcus's team regarding this, likely assuming that because they paid the bill, the rules didn't apply to them. I called Marcus into my office and laid out the entire situation. Marcus has been with my company for 5 years. He knows how hard I work, and when he heard how my family was treating me, his jaw literally dropped in disgust. I told him to completely take over the file, to stop sending them reminders, and to ensure that no one from our staff lifted a finger to help them bypass a single corporate policy. Furthermore, I told him that I would be personally attending the Friday morning meeting, sitting in the owner's executive suite that overlooks the main lobby. On Friday morning, my mother and Chloe breezed into the grand lobby of the Grand Oaks Manor, looking incredibly stressed, demanding to speak to the manager because they wanted to change the floral arrangements on the grand staircase, an adjustment that violated our strict historical preservation guidelines. Marcus met them in the lobby and calmly escorted them back into the main boardroom, right next to my office. Through the double-paned glass, I watched my mother slam her designer purse on the table and start demanding special treatment. Marcus remained completely unfazed, slid the compliance paperwork across the table, and said, "Before we discuss any changes, Mrs. Imran, we need to address the fact that your final event insurance waiver is unsigned, and your catering package discount has been revoked due to a corporate auditing update." My mother scoffed, looking outraged, and said, "What do you mean a discount was revoked?" "We were told we got a special promotional rate. We can't afford to pay another $10,000 right now. Just sign the papers and let us bring in our decorators." Marcus looked her dead in the eye and said, "Unfortunately, the promotional rate was a manual override authorized directly by the owner of Vanguard Estates, and due to a breach of character guidelines, the owner has personally rescinded that favor. Furthermore, the owner has requested to review your guest capacity in person." Chloe chimed in, whining, "This is ridiculous. Who even is the owner? Call them right now. Do you know how much money we are paying you people? My wedding is tomorrow, and I will have this entire place shut down if you ruin my day." That was my cue. I opened the adjoining door, stepped into the boardroom wearing a bespoke charcoal suit, and calmly leaned against the edge of the table. The look of absolute, unadulterated horror that washed over my mother's face is an image I will treasure for the rest of my life. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again like a fish out of water, while Chloe just stared at me, completely baffled, and asked, Danish, "What the hell are you doing here? Did you get a job as a janitor or something?" "Get out, we are having an important meeting." Marcus smiled politely, stood up, and said, "Miss Imran, please show some respect. You're speaking to the founder, CEO, and sole proprietor of Vanguard Estates and the legal owner of the Grand Oaks Manor." The room went so quiet you could hear the antique clock ticking on the wall. Chloe looked at my mother, then back at me, her face turning a bright, angry shade of red. My mother finally found her voice, stammering, "Danish, what is the meaning of this? You own this place. Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at her, entirely cold, and said, "Because every time I tried to talk about my life, you told me my business didn't matter, and that I didn't understand high society. You told me you didn't have a single seat for me at my own sister's wedding, because you needed to save room for Bradley's wealthy friends and a girl Julian met 2 weeks ago, so I decided to take your advice. I am stepping aside, just like you asked. But since I am no longer a part of this family, and this is strictly a business transaction, I am enforcing the absolute letter of the law regarding this property." I informed them that because they failed to submit the signed compliance forms by the 10 o'clock deadline, which had just passed 5 minutes ago, and because they were refusing to pay the standard, non-discounted rate for the venue's internal services, their contract was officially in default. Chloe began to hysterically sob, screaming that I was ruining her life, while my mother dropped to her knees, literally begging me, crying about how Bradley's family would look down on them forever if the wedding was canceled, and how they would be completely ruined financially. I didn't flinch. I told them that out of respect for Bradley, who actually seemed like a decent guy who had no part in their toxicity, I wouldn't cancel the wedding completely, but under one strict condition. The seating chart would be rearranged immediately. Julian's girlfriend was completely removed from the building. Furthermore, Table 3 was dismantled, and a single, grand executive armchair was placed directly at the very front of the room, right next to the altar, facing the audience, where I would sit during the entire ceremony as the guest of honor. For the reception, my name was placed at the head table, directly between Chloe and Bradley, displacing my mother to the back corner of the room near the kitchen doors. I told them that if they argued, if they made a face, or if they muttered a single complaint to any guest, I would have my security team clear the entire estate within 10 minutes, lock the gates, and leave them with a dark, empty mansion. They had no choice but to agree, weeping and trembling as they signed the amended contract. The next day, the wedding went exactly according to my blueprint. When the guests arrived, they were incredibly confused to see me sitting in a massive leather armchair right next to the priest, looking out over the crowd like a king overlooking his court. My parents looked utterly physically ill the entire day, forced to smile for the cameras while knowing that their entire charade was held together by the thread of my mercy. At the reception, Bradley was actually incredibly impressed when he found out I owned the venue, spending half the night asking me for real estate investment advice, which infuriated my mother even more as she watched from her miserable table near the kitchen doors. After the wedding, I officially cut contact with my parents and siblings, instructing Marcus that they are permanently banned from ever stepping foot on any Vanguard property again. They tried to send flying old relatives to guilt-trip me, but I blocked them all without a second thought. I saved my sister's wedding from being an absolute disaster, but I made sure they knew exactly who held the power, and they will never, ever look down on me again. Looking back on this entire wild experience, I realized that sometimes the only way to deal with people who treat you like an option is to remind them that you are actually the gatekeeper. My family spent years trying to make me feel small, but when the dust settled, their vanity and greed forced them to bow to the very person they tried to cast away. It taught me that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, respect, or love, and that building your own success is the absolute best shield against the people who want to see you fail. If you think I did the absolute right thing by turning the tables on my toxic family and claiming my rightful place, please hit that like button right now to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another crazy story of ultimate revenge and family drama, and definitely share your final thoughts on this whole incredible mess in the comments section below. I want to know if you think I should have gone even harder on them. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all in the next story.